Alicia.
And Nicole.
And we are
Yoni Power.
So we're talking to you about how to have more orgasms. And for step one, we said that you should stop faking orgasms. So being very honest about when you're happy and when you're not happy. So really just stop pretending to be happy with anything in your life, but especially in your sex life. So for step two, we would like for you to address any sexual repression. And so this week we're going to talk about sexual repression from parents. And the idea is, what sort of thoughts or feelings or ideas did you get from your parents about sex? Because that can actually, you can actually carry that with you into, as an adult, and that can affect how you view sex and how comfortable you are with sex, and even the possibility of actually reaching an orgasm.
Exactly. Not to mention the fact that we raise our kids to think differently about sex. Like, for example, we sort of glorify it when our son has had his first wet dream, or we were to walk into the room and our son is busying himself. It's kind of like, all right, let's shut the door and walk away with that. But we don't really think about what we would do if we walked in on our daughter doing something like that. And so it's become this sort of dichotomy of how to teach your children, how to teach your daughters in particular, how to deal with themselves and how to grow sexually, how to understand themselves sexually.
Right.
There's
so
a lot.
Usually for women, well, for girls, it's usually don't have sex. And it's, you can get pregnant, you can get an STD, you can...
You're going to keep your virginity forever.
Right, keep your virginity forever. So there's this sexual repression that starts very young, where a lot of times girls have a bad view of sex. If they have sex, they may view themselves badly. And so even when you grow up and become married, you can still have some of that within you where you feel like, okay, I'm dirty.
Yep.
I'm no longer pure. I'm no longer in this high regard because now I'm having sex. And the other part of that is you haven't been taught the positive of sex, or how to really embrace it and honor it, and it being something that's very beautiful. And so it's not only the messages that are negative, but it's the lack of positive messages. So we just really want you to think about, what were the messages from your parents? Do you still believe them, or do you need to work on creating a new truth or a new understanding for yourself about how you feel about sex, and releasing any sort of shame or guilt or anxiety or fear around it?
Yeah, a lot of the shame and guilt and anxiety and fear does stem from what our parents either taught us or didn't teach us from sex growing up, and we have to recognize that either we did or we didn't grow to understand ourselves sexually, and it did start from a young age. So understanding that we are perhaps sexually repressed from childhood, whether from parents. Later we'll be talking about how religion or other institutions such as education, religion, and even the media have had an effect on our sexual repression in society as a whole, as well as us individually. So
yeah, and then also if there was just no conversation at all, then you may not have, any messages. I honestly just had my first open, honest conversation about sex with my mother. I'm 31, just now having this conversation, and her thoughts were, make sure you use a condom with everybody. And I was just like, okay, thank you, I'll do that.
You're like, is that it?
That's it.
Yeah.
So there's still this idea of protect your daughters. There isn't this, this beauty associated with it. It's always sort of this negative, protect, kind of shame, just, watch yourself.
Yeah, on the other side of that, growing up with my parents, when I was around 4 or 5, my parents, instead of sitting me down and having this conversation, I'm pretty fortunate in this sense, but they gave me a little cartoon book explaining what sex was. So I had a pretty good understanding of the human body and sex as it truly happened. It's not the birds and the bees conversation that most people might have, but I had a true understanding of what sex was, and I was pretty comfortable with myself at a young age. However, I was not explained about masturbation, self-expression, things like that, which we find to be dirty conversations to have, but they're necessary conversations to have, because if you don't explore yourself, you don't know what you truly like, you don't know your desires, and you can't express them to your partner later on going forward. So I think it's not just the sex conversation that parents need to have with their children, and you know, even if it's you are an adult and you're thinking back to your own childhood, it's nothing to be upset about. It's just something to think about and understand why you might have the feelings that you have, why you might have the understanding that you have about sex. So sexual repression is something that definitely comes from parents. It's something that I think all of us need to address, because if we were not taught the right things as children, then we are going to grow and teach our children the same things as they grow older, and as you know, as we have them later on in our lives. So it's something that we need to understand, something that we need to realize, figure out how to either deal with or reverse it. And just move forward, let it go, and move forward, understand
and
ourselves.
Even talk to your partner about it, but just really have an open conversation. Even if you don't have a conversation with someone, just take time to think about, like, what messages did I get from my parents about sex, and am I holding on to that in any way in regards to how I feel about myself and how I feel about my sexuality. Especially when it comes to like different types of sex, like oral sex or anal sex, or just different types of sex. Like what do you think about them, and where might that come from?
Exactly.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. See you next week.
Thanks, guys.